Okay, we're going to have a little look at braiding, and I've just got a little sample piece here just to show you some of the differences, and that's just 2 layers that I've just literally folded in half, and I've marked my braid holes on. I'll show you on the main wallet in a second, but I just wanted to show you different sorts of braiding now. This is a faux leather braiding that I've got. It's a flat braiding, and I've used this. It's about 3mm wide. It's 3mm. It's approximately 1/8 of an inch wide, and for this you need slightly bigger holes. I've also got this, which is I think it's 1mm wide. It's a sort of a waxed cord, the sort of thing that's used in jewellery making. I've also got some slightly thicker cord, but I can't for the life of me find where I've put it, safe place and all that stuff. But I've made a Braidy with a thicker cord as well, so you can use any of these sort of things, but your holes that you make will need to be sized appropriately. Now I'm just gonna trim off a little bit of this to show you. So when we start our braiding, what we do is we come from the inside out. So I'm just gonna, this actually goes through the braiding holes fairly easily because it's got a bit of structure to it. So I'm going to go from the inside. I'm just opening out the side and coming out through the hole that I've created, and I've created a fairly big hole for this, and I'm using one of these because this is what I like to use. You can use a screw punch or whatever you really want to use, and I've got approximately about 1 inch of braiding on the inside, and all I will do is I'll actually glue that down on the inside there so it's out of the way. I'm not going to glue it just for this moment because I don't need to. I'm going to come back into, so it's coming out of the back, a hole at the back. I'm going to go back into the hole at the front there. So I'm going twice through that hole at the back, so it's actually going through there twice. Now what I find useful is an awl to push this through, just to get it through that first hole and out through the back. You could use a small flat bladed screwdriver. What you want is for the holes to be big enough to push the braiding through, and they need to be able to move freely but not too tight, but there again not too loose. So it's kind of a trial and error, and it's worth doing this on a spare piece of faux leather so that you know what size holes work well for you. So this is a, as I say, it says it's a 3mm braid, and I made 2mm holes. So I'm going to come back in through. So once I've gone through, I'm just going to go back round. Pulling it tight, but not stretching the faux leather. And then back through. Obviously you're going to have quite a large amount of braiding. You'll need about approximately 2.5 meters of braiding to go around the entire thingy. So it depends how tight your braiding is, depends on how much you're going to use, but I would always cut 2.5 meters just to be on the safe side. If you're using this flat sort of braid, make sure that your braid stays flat against the side and it doesn't twist at all. And so you can push that through easily with an awl. You will be threading, you'll be pulling a lot of braiding through. This is just to give you an idea. It's not really to. This is basically how we do the braiding. And each stitch that you do, if you like, if you're calling it a stitch, we'll call it a stitch, shall we? Just make sure it sits evenly. Make sure that the tension is evenly done, and that the braiding cord itself sits nicely and evenly and flat against the side and isn't twisted. So each stitch needs to sit nicely. Oops, caught on the handle of that. On the side. This does take a while. It actually probably takes longer to do the braiding than it does to make the entire wallet. And remember, at some points you're going to be going through several layers. But I haven't felt the need, when I've used this sort of braid, to add any kind of extra support to the end so that I can thread it through. I just push it through with the awl, or I say a small flat bladed screwdriver, to use as a sort of a pokey tool, if I want to call it that. But you can see there, the braiding looks beautiful. It's even, and it's all nice and flat against the side of the wallet. Now, if I was going to use cording, which is round, I'd be using much smaller holes for a start. And what I generally do, I'd do the same thing to start. So we start coming from the inside out, pull it through so that I've got about an inch of my cording on the inside, and glue that down. And exactly the same process as you've just done. We're going to go round through the back and out of that front hole, she says. But I've used a much smaller hole. This is a 1mm hole. And the trouble with this is it tends to go a bit frizzy at the ends. So what I find is the best thing to do is to take a little bit of, actually parcel tape, brown parcel tape is better than duct tape. And that's what I happen to have here. So just a small piece, and then a needle or a pin that doesn't have an end on it, something that's, let's find my self-threading needle. And what I'll do is lay my needle onto my tape, lay my cording next door to the needle, so you can see, I hope you can see that the cording is right next to the needle. And then I'm just going to wind that tape around. You can chop the end off where there's no needle there. And what you end up with is a sort of a nice stiff end that you can then use to push your cording through the holes. So you're effectively using that as a needle. So you can then go back from, you just need a small amount of tape around the ends, and you're using it like a needle effectively. And you're just going to go, again, make sure each stitch is nice and even. And you will find that your cording will twist as you do it, so you do need to sort of straighten it out. And you will have, say, when you start, you'll have like 2 meters of cording, so you're going to be pulling through to get it through. Make sure each stitch is nice and even. And just keep going. Make sure you've got no twists in your cord. Cording is actually probably a little more difficult to do because it does twist as you go round. So the flat braiding is easier. We'll just keep going. Making sure that each stitch is nicely even and the same amount of tightness, same tension right the way around. So you can see you've got two completely different looks there. Now you can use, I've done one with ribbon, with 1/4 inch ribbon. I would say 1/4 inch ribbon was probably a wee bit big. 1/8 of an inch ribbon would work, definitely. But you can use your imagination. Use what you've got. Don't go buying loads of stuff. If you're a jewellery maker or a multiple crafter, you may well have any of these things in your stash. So that's basically how we do the cording. Now I'm just going to trim that off because I would quite like to have that needle back. Bearing in mind that needle will probably be all gummed up now. I'm going to put that out of the way. Anyway, let's look at how we make our marks for our binding. Now you're going to need a Sharpie pen or something of that ilk. Just make sure it works before I go any further. Yes, it does. And you're going to need a ruler. Now we're going to start on the top straight edge. So on that top edge. And we're going to mark. I've removed the clips from that top straight edge. But I'm going to mark the centre. And I know that that's 3 3/4 away from either side, because I know that's 7.5 inches across. And I'm going to set my ruler so that it's 1/8 of an inch in from the outside edge. And I'm going to mark just literally, that's not going to show very well on there, so I might need a different colour. That's because my faux leather is such a jazzy colour. So let's try the green. Oh, that's better. I'm going to make little dots at 1/4 inch increments all the way along the top edge. Now I've done curves on mine, so you have two options when it comes to the curves. If you feel you can eyeball it, then you can eyeball the dots. I must admit that I do on occasions do that. If not, then use the dots on the template that show you where the dots need to go. I am actually going to eyeball this because I'm quite used to doing it now. All your dots need to be 1/8 of an inch away from the side. Now, what I like to do, once I've done those top ones, I will take my my wheel, and I know what I'm going to do on this one. So I picked my hole size already, and I will do the holes along the top edge first. So on each hole, and I like to use one of these, I'm going to go, and you get that click noise. I'm just going to twist it a little bit to make sure that the hole is gone right the way through. And just make sure that the sides are still together. Now, if you've got any little bits that don't come out, you can push them out with your scissors or an awl, and you're going to go all the way. Just move that ruler because that's in the way. All the way along the top edge. Oh. Carefully cutting those holes. Now you can use one of these. You can use a Japanese screw punch. or you could use a cutting awl and a hammer on a cutting mat if you wanted to. Every now and again you might need to take a pin and poke out any of the bits of faux leather that get kind of caught up in there. They're supposed to feed through to the top, and they do eventually, but you end up with lots of little dots like that. But if you've got it, if it's full up with bits of faux leather, it won't cut properly. And mine, there's an audible click as it goes through. It's worth taking your time and doing this really carefully, because you'll get lovely even braiding if you do it carefully. Once you've got those holes in place, you can put your clips back on, because you really want everything to stay in place and not move. It's definitely worth doing a little bit of experimenting on a spare bit of faux leather, just to see what kind of size of holes you need for the braiding that you've got, because each one will be different. I've got some sort of heavier cord that's 2mm cord, and you need a bit bigger hole for that. I say this bit actually takes longer than the rest of the wallet does all together. Let's get rid of the bits out of the... So you should be able to just poke them through, and then they come out the other end, and you end up with lots of little bits of very little tiny bits of round confetti. What you must make sure is that you keep your panels perfectly together so that your holes are nice and even. So you can see there, all the holes are looking beautiful on the top there. Everything's hunky-dory. So I'm just going to pop some more clips back on that top edge, because I'm now going to start going down the side, and I'm going to do the top part first. So this part of the flat part rather than the bottom half. And again, 1/8 of an inch away from the side. Use your ruler. And you want your1/4 inch mark to be level with that last hole that you created, whether that's whether you've done the curved edge or the square. And again, you're just going to make tiny marks at 1/4 inch increments. Just doing one bit at a time. You don't need to, if you take all the clips off, the whole thing will kind of go all over the place. So keeping it clipped and just doing a small part at a time. Clearing out the, so if you push the needle through, push the pin through, they all come flying out the back, all your little bits of faux leather. Your last hole should sit just fractionally above where your money slot goes. So I'm just gonna, I've got one that needs to be poked out there. Just gonna reclip that bit. Before going round to the other side and doing the top part of that bit. Again, making sure that your 1/4 inch mark on your ruler is level with that last hole that you made on the curve or on the corner, whichever you're doing. Again, 1/4 inch increments. Let's just remove that one so I can get to that bottom. And you can see that's kind of the same thing happening this side as happened on the other side. Right, I'll come back and do that bit in a minute because I want to show you the bottom part first, otherwise you're going to be bored silly of watching me making holes. So having got our holes in that top part, we're now going to come down here and start making the holes in the bottom part. And we have the exact same process. Again, you're going to start with your 1/4 inch mark on that last hole that you created. Sorry, the leg of my tripod is in the way of my ruler. It's not helping. again 1/4 inch increments. Until you get to the bottom. Now the thing with this bit is because it's more layers, it's well worth keeping them clipped until you get to where you need to actually start making the holes, so it doesn't move. So I'm going to start at the top here. Let's get rid of that. And this is the reason that we didn't stitch right to the very edge of our wallet, because we don't want to make a hole in our stitching, which will then have the stitching unravel. Do make sure that you keep your cutting tool free of the little bits of debris, because you won't be able to cut through if it's full, and you may need to do that more often as you go down here, because you've got several layers. Once you've got those ones cut, move your clip out of the way. So you're going through quite a lot of layers now, so you may well need to clear your tool to ensure that it cuts through all of the layers. The right way, it always helps. I find just twisting it once I've actually cut means that the little bits that are kind of being cut out are definitely cut out. I'm not sure if it's actually necessary or not, but it's something that I've always done, so it's kind of force of habit, I guess. Now you can see they're popping out on the top now, which is what they're supposed to do, but they sometimes don't. They sometimes get a bit clogged up inside. So make sure that each one, the hole has gone right the way through, and you don't have any. I've got a few there that have not cut quite the way through, or they've cut through but they haven't just come away, so you need to just poke those out. If you've got any fibres that are kind of catching them on, then you can just trim them with a little pair of snips. You want all of the holes to be clear. Just the little bits that are caught in the ends there. And you're going to do exactly the same thing on the other side. Once you've made the holes, clip it again to make sure it doesn't move. So I'm going to carry on and do the rest of my holes, and then I'm going to start my braiding, and I'm going to start my braiding in exactly the same way as I showed you here. So you start from inside of the layers, coming out you leave about an inch on the inside and just glue it down. It shows you in the pattern. Just glue it down inside, and then you start your braiding, and you're going to go all the way around. I'm actually going to try doing braiding with 2 different braids, so I'm going to come in from one side and out from the other side with this. I don't know if it's going to work. Got 2 chances and we'll see. It may be a horrible disaster, but I need to finish doing my holes before I can start my braiding.